Welcome to Divisionalysis. I'm Fog. I said to myself that I would never do a build video, but here we are. Today I make a build based on the burst bubble. Let's go. So every weapon has its own characteristics. You have its damage per second, you have the time it takes to fire its entire mag, as in how long it can sustain that burst damage per second, and then you have the total damage that that weapon can put out in a single magazine, and that's the total mag damage, and then off to the side you have reload time. Base bullet damage times rate of fire will give you your burst DPS. Magazine size divided by rate of fire will give you the time it takes to fire the magazine, and your base damage times the magazine size will give you your total magazine damage. And that's what we're focusing on today. That is essentially burst bubble, as in how much your weapon can burst, how much damage is put out during that burst, and therefore what you can kill with one magazine. So if we take the base statistics for each of the weapons, this is what their base bullet damage looks like as a percentage of the highest, and the highest being the AKM. RPM, here it is. The 100 percenters are the 900 rounds per minute weapons. And if you multiply base bullet damage by RPM, you get your burst DPS. Here you go, the 100%er is the Bighorn. High bullet damage and a reasonably high RPM mean that it trumps the rest with its burst DPS. It's not until you dig further into the other statistics that you realise why everybody isn't using the Bighorn, other than the fact that it doesn't have a talent. Reload speed. Lower is better in this case, and the Bighorn again has one of the lowest along with the capacitor. Now the statistic that I use, or the calculation that I use in regards to burst fire, includes reload speed. So I use a burst fire DPS, a burst firing DPS. So that is incorporating how long it takes a weapon to take down an enemy, followed by its reload. And here you can see the burst firing DPS, and why I like this compared to the burst DPS is obviously because it includes reloads, but there is a very large difference. And as you can see here, the capacitor makes a massive jump because of its very low reload speed, and that's because the reload speed difference between the other weapons is greater than what the difference is in the time to kill, and that's why the capacitor can beat the FAMAS at taking down a number of enemies. And then you have total mag damage. So in this case we're using a 50 round magazine, and we multiply that by the base damage or base bullet damage, and what you can see here is that the slower firing weapons, the AK, the AKM and the TKB, all have a very high total mag damage, and the Eagle Bearer with a 60 round magazine also has a high total mag damage, and this is what the burst bubble is. Essentially the total amount of damage that you can put out within one magazine, and that's what we're going to be basing our build off today. So when you combine the rate of fire with the total mag damage or the burst bubble, and you include reload speed, this is what you get. You get sustained damage per second. So if I continually fire that magazine all the way through to the end and then I reload, you get sustained DPS. And as you can see here, the Eagle Bearer with its 60 round magazine and its short reload time rises to the top. Then you have burst firing DPS compared to sustained DPS. And I've made these comparisons in my ranking system on my assault rifles, and what you get when you average these two is very, very little difference across the entire weapon suite when it comes to assault rifles. Now, Chameleon is the only one that really sticks out, and that is because its damage talents are so very, very good. And the P416, I honestly believe the only reason that it is a little bit lower than the rest is because it actually got nerfed a few years back when everybody used it as the primary weapon. And so there you can see there's not very much difference across all. So capitalizing on a weapon system's strengths and weaknesses is the defining factor of what is going to be the best weapon for you to use in any given at any given time. So we're going back to the burst bubble, the total magazine. I've converted this to black because in the following graphs it's represented as black. So the amount of damage that a weapon can put out in a single magazine is represented as black. And in this first one, what we've got is the absolute base damage at a 50 round magazine. And this is versus heroic enemies. So the red obviously represents a normal, purple a veteran, and a yellow an elite. And as I've described in some of my previous videos, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get that black bar to exceed the gold bar and have a margin of error included in that to make up for things like accuracy and the uptime of certain impact multipliers and the rest of it. So that's the goal of today with the build. And what a lot of people don't quite grasp, I think they understand it, but they don't quite understand the importance, is the fact that an NPC has its own burst bubble as well. And what you can see here is that if an NPC picks up one of the weapons, it's exactly the same as you picking it up, except you have the advantage of all the division tech that goes along with that. So that includes mods to the weapon, extended mags to the weapon, includes all of your gear multipliers that make you handling the weapon that much more powerful. But at its core, a red True Sons soldier who is using a P416, this is what their burst bubble looks like as far as the red is concerned. And what I've done here is I've put in a new concept that I want to introduce, which is your survival bubble. And if you are using a 6 red core build, you have about 750,000 in armor at its absolute base, because that's all you've got is the absolute base, and you have about 300,000 in health that sits behind that. So that is represented here by blue lines or blue columns at 1,050,000 HP. And as you can see, the P416 in the hands of an NPC, if you're running a 6 core red build, you are within the burst bubble of the NPC. That is not a lot of margin of error at all. Now I'll talk more about how the AI acts and how it fires and all that sort of stuff in future videos, but right now if an NPC was to fire its single 30 round magazine at you, you would die if you didn't do anything, if you didn't do something about it. And the way that a 6 red core build does something about it is to kill that enemy before it can kill you. The constant arms race is to have your survival bubble larger than what your enemy's is. And in this case, it's a single NPC. But remember that you are facing more than a single NPC at many times. So the goal of today is to maximize the burst bubble that we've got to just enough to cover an elite at heroic level with a little bit of margin of error. And then what we're going to do is make sure that our survival bubble is as large as possible, because not dying is much more important than killing an NPC 0.1 of a second quicker. The first bit of division tech that we get to improve our weapons is the Keener's Watch. And I have it at 1,000, so I got 10% weapon damage, I get 20% headshot, which I'm going to ignore for the moment, 10% crit chance, and I also get 20% crit damage. I'm going to ignore headshots because they're great when I can get them, but the actual percentage of the time that I actually hit them is quite low. So when the division hands out an assault rifle, it comes with an additional assault rifle damage stat. It comes with health damage, which we're going to ignore, and we're going to assume that falls into our margin of error. So whatever damage figure we come up with is going to be a little bit higher, but this isn't constant. It's only 60% of the time at heroic. So that's going to form part of that margin of error as far as our burst bubble is concerned. And the third attribute we are going to take as damage to targets out of cover. Now, damage to targets out of cover only occurs 82% of the time when you're playing heroic, for the most part, roughly. And so when I apply that damage, I'm only going to calculate it as if it occurs 82% of the time. What we also get is 3 mod slots in most weapons and 4 in the majority. So in the case of the weapons that I'm using today, I am going to put crit chance on the weapon wherever I possibly can, and the extended magazine goes on as well, again adding to our margin of error for our burst bubble. Let's see what it does to our base stats. So here we have our base stats, and when we add in Keena's Watch, weapon damage, targets out of cover, and the weapon mods, we can increase our damage to this amount. So still not yet enough to be able to kill a veteran, but every single weapon now has a red NPC within its burst bubble, especially when you take into consideration the margin of error generated by that health damage as well. We're making progress. On at least 3 pieces of our gear, we also get a gear mod slot, which I can then assign to any one of these gear attributes as well. And so we're going to assign 3 gear mods for damage. See what that does to our burst bubble. So this was weapon and mods and the watch only. And now if we add in gear mods, this is where we get to. We're still not at a level where any weapon can say that it can take down a veteran enemy at all. So we need more damage. So I'm looking for one piece of gear with the maximum amount of impact. And when weapon damage is already so low, then I think Fenris is definitely going to be our best option. I can add 10% additional assault rifle damage. I can add a red core being an additional 15% weapon damage. So I'm adding 25% additional weapon damage. And when our damage is so low as it is, the effects of additive damage, like weapon damage is, are felt much less than they are when your weapon damage is high. So at this point of time, we're getting a majority of this 25% even though it is additive. We also get to add an extra 6% crit chance and an extra 12% crit damage. Let's see what that one piece of gear does. So here we are before with the weapons integral damage and its mods. We've got our Keena's Watch and we've got 3 gear mods set for damage. And when we add our one piece of Fenris, it's all red. This is where we get to. And now we actually have 4 weapons: the Eagle Bearer, the AKM and a military AK or a black market AK, and also the TKB can all now say that they can take down a veteran inside one magazine. So a veteran is now inside one magazine for those 4 weapons. And the thing is that if you can say that a veteran is inside your burst bubble, that means that you can stagger an elite enemy as well. But we also get specialization points as well, and we can attribute those to assault rifle damage, and we can gain an extra 15% damage that way. And if we add that to the base stats, we now have 4, 5, 6 weapons that can now say within one magazine that they can kill a veteran. The ACR and the MK16 have now jumped above that threshold bubble. Let's see what it looks like in the firing range. Okay, so I'm in the firing range and I have a black market AKM. It's not maxed out, but that's okay. I've got 3 crit chance mods just as described. I've also got 2 gear mods in, and I'm using a 3rd piece to represent that 3rd gear mod. That being these knee pads where I've got some crit chance on them, but I don't have a gear mod in the chest, so that's representing that mod there. And all we want to know is, does this black market AKM have enough in its burst bubble to cover a veteran? Now we've got a bit of a margin of error here because the target is 100% of the time out of cover. So we should be able to, within our margin of error, definitely cover a veteran, and that's what we're seeing here. If we take it to the elite, full magazine unloaded is not yet enough to kill the elite, so it's not within the burst bubble, but it certainly would have staggered it. So I could technically take this build into a mission right now. Because as you can see, with 100% headshots, the elite is in fact within the burst bubble of this weapon. But that is a very small margin of error. It's not where we want to be. Let's add some damage. Now, unequivocally, one of the best ways to add damage to your build is with amplified damage talents. So if we have a look, let's go to here. Now, amplified damage talents. Spotter is an amplified damage talent, amplifies weapon and skill damage by 15% to pulsed enemies. We also have Glass Cannon, which amplifies damage by 25%, but it significantly reduces our survival bubble. So I'm going to stay away from Glass Cannon, and I'm going to stick with Spotter, I think. There are very few other sources of amplified damage, but I'm going to use Closer. Now the Closer offers 20% amplified damage, so only 5% less than Glass Cannon, but a significant improvement in our survival bubble, or at least no detriment to our survival bubble. So let's see what Spotter does to our damage numbers. And with Spotter, we've increased by exactly 20%. So we're still short of our elite, so we need more damage. Let's go back and find some more. Now there aren't too many other sources of amplified damage. Backpack talents are one of them. At this point, we have no total weapon damage talents, so it wouldn't yet be additive, which means that any total weapon damage talent that I add would be 100% multiplicative. So it would technically act exactly like an amplified. But I think, considering we're using Closer, then the perfect combination is probably going to be Flatline, one of the few amplifying weapon talents, so I may as well take advantage of it. So amplifies weapon damage by 15% to pulsed enemies, and if I'm using Closer, it makes sense that I need to be able to pulse something, so I'm going to use the Technician, and I'm going to use a weapon that has the ability to attach the linked laser pointer, and probably the best one that already is showing signs that it has a large bubble, or a large burst bubble, is going to be the TKB and the Kingbreaker variation of it, which allows me to add 20% amplified damage. So let's see what that does to the stats. So just Spotter was here, and we're going to leave behind all the weapons that can't attach a linked laser pointer. They're going to stay at the same damage level, and all the other ones are going to take either 15%, or in the case of the TKB, it now gets to add 20%. And here you can see there's two definite standouts. We have the Kingbreaker, all the way up here. We also have the black market or the military AK, which is very high up, and even the ACR and the MK16, their burst bubbles are getting up there. But let's check it out and see what it looks like. So at 100% accuracy, there's a couple of bullets margin of error. I'm not doing any headshots, so maybe I can actually take this build into a mission. Let's see what happens. I like using bank headquarters because it's got a named enemy very early on in the mission, and all of the gameplay footage from here on out is going to be at 2x speed because we're already very far into the video. Let's go.
You're going to need to get the access code to the vault to recover the item that I installed from Air Force One. Our hyena insider says whoever's posted in the old CEO's office will have a key card to give you access to the vault.
So I'm able to take down a veteran and a red bar in a single magazine. Still, no problems at all. And although the accuracy felt sloppy, the reload time was a little bit long, I certainly was still able to clear this with relatively little difficulty, take down a named enemy with this build. But let's keep making some improvements. Okay, so I mentioned that the accuracy and the stability and rounds on target were not the greatest, and I also mentioned how the reload time was a little bit slow. So maybe we can do something about that, and also definitely more damage would certainly help. There was a couple of times where my shield was pushed to its limits. At the moment I'm only carrying 32% crit chance and 80.6% crit damage. So I want to be able to improve my crit chance, crit damage, and handling. So here is a piece that will do just that. One red piece of Seska. I'm going to add 15% weapon damage, 10% crit chance. I'm going to add 7.5% weapon handling and an additional 12% crit damage. And I'm also going to switch over my closer to a more reasonable chest piece, which is going to still keep the blue core, but I'm going to change that to crit chance and crit damage. And on the Kingbreaker, I've increased my accuracy and stability, and now I have a reload time that's actually the same as a FAMAS. So this should see some improvement, definitely. Let's take it to the firing range. We already know that this extra damage is certainly going to put an elite within the burst bubble comfortably. Let's just check how comfortably that's going to be. Yep. Probably 20% of the magazine at least is there as a margin of error. If I'm shooting at the head, I'm almost at the point where I can say that with 50% accuracy on headshots, that I'm going to be able to definitely take down Elite. So comfortably within the burst bubble. So let's take it back into the mission and see what it does.
Installed from Air Force One. Ian Insider says whoever's posted in the old CEO's office will have a key card and should give you access to the vault. Rogue agent detected. Rogue restore hive detected. Hive detected. Rogue volunteer drone detected. Hostile volunteer drone detected. Serious trauma detected. Rogue restore hive detected. Hostile restore hive detected. Eliminated.
Now I've just taken down what is arguably the hardest content at heroic level, being a couple of rogues, with this build here. Now it wasn't pretty. I used all of my medkits and the resources available to me, but I've got plenty of room for improvement in this build. But this alone was able to take down 2 rogue enemies. And just for laughs, I continued for the rest of the mission just to take it through to those next named enemies.
Looks like that keycard is the one we were looking for.
So no problems with rogues, no problems with the named enemy, so clearly I have enough damage, and there's enough room in this build that I'm inevitably going to add more damage to this build just by a matter of process. So one of the things I noticed was that the shield, I lost that early on and it came close to going down a couple of times against the rogue. So if I can do something about the shield and really tank that up and really improve my survivability, that'd be good. One of the best ways that I can do that is with the forge, and that's going to give me immediately 50% additional shield health. So that is definitely an option. That's definitely an option. We've got the Bakaro's holster. I could get an additional 15% weapon damage, but the weapon damage and the skill haste probably really aren't going to do me any good. I can go for Bellstone, 1% armor regen. At the moment I'm carrying 1.5 million armor. Let's just check out what 1% armor regen is going to give me. Ugh, a piddly 20k armor regen. Each bullet that an enemy does is on average about 75k, so it's going to take me 3 seconds just to regenerate one bullet's damage. I don't really think that that's going to cut it. An extra Seska's only going to be... an extra Ursina would give me 10% armor on kill. Now that's certainly going to add to my survivability and the frequency with which I'm going to be able to do damage. I've also got the option of a second piece of Fenris, which would decrease my reload time down to 1.9 seconds. That's nothing to be scoffed at. I think what I can do is I can add the Forge, I can add extra crit chance, I can keep my armor up, and I'm also getting 20% incoming repairs. Now that's not helping me at the moment, but the crutch of a Reviver Hive wasn't necessary. I survived 2 rogues. I don't think anything's going to trouble me above and then, especially if I'm going to add tankiness to my shield and potentially improve my survivability. So now I can get rid of that and replace that with the Artificer, and now I'm getting an extra 20% extra benefit from that Artificer Hive. Now my shield is tanky AF. Now the question is, what backpack? Actually, it's really no question. The only answer is going to be the Memento. It's going to give me an extra armor core. It's going to give me an extra skill level, and it's going to increase my damage. It's going to increase bonus armor. It's going to increase the efficiency of everything. It's just the go-to piece. The next question is, what is going to be the final piece? Gloves. I could go with Grupo, but with the addition of the Memento and the crit chance, crit damage that I've got elsewhere, I really don't need the extra damage. I think what I really want is to get that extra Usina Getica piece in order to get that armor on kill. Unfortunately, I don't have any Usina Getica gloves. I could go with Wyvern, but again, I don't need the damage. Usina Getica is where it's at, but I don't have any, so excuse me for a second. I'm just going to go farm. Well, I just did one countdown run with the gear set to Usina. I didn't get any gloves, but I did get some knee pads, and I've rolled health off for crit damage. So I'm going to swap my knees and gloves around. So I've got some Fenris gloves that I can use. And now I've got these Usina Getica knee pads, which now gives me 10% armor on kill. I now have a tier 6 shield, 1.4 million armor. I've got an Artificer Hive that's regenning that shield for something over 40% every single tick. I've got the Memento that's going to be adding me stacks of damage. It's going to be adding me stacks of bonus armor. I can roll this Usina. I'm just going to roll it. I'm going to recalibrate so that I can get the max out of it. I've decided that it's going to be armor that I'm going to keep there. So I'm just going to max that out. And on other builds I can change it to weapon damage if I want, but I've got that now. And what does that give me as far as stats is concerned? I've got 57.5 and 115, which is probably going to go to 60% exactly and 120% if I optimize completely. But now I've got 1.5 million armor after the recal. And I think we are ready to roll.
You're gonna need to get the access codes to the vault to recover the item the hyena stole from Air Force One. Our hyena insider says whoever's posted in the old CEO's office will have a key card that should give you access to the vault.
This build absolutely slaps. It's so much fun. Oh man, you can move so freely everywhere. The shield is so ridiculously tanky, and you do more than enough damage, especially when you're collecting those memento tabs. Oh my god, I'm so very pleased with this build. Give it a crack and let me know in the comments if you are loving it, because I certainly am. If you like, then like. If you want to see more, subscribe. But I will see you in the next one. Bye now.